Right, okay, well, we've got a few people in the stream. Hi, big hello to Electronic Fox, and well, I guess a bit of a thank you for handing over all the original RBI track stuff. Shout if anything, shout if anything isn't going quite right with the stream. I know we've had some echo problems before, but I should have that nailed this time. I'm just going to kind of carry on. I probably won't talk all the way through it. I'll just sort of crack on. I've loaded up one of my little track models just for a reference for size and stuff. I'll sort of use that as a reference point, I suppose. I'm just going to create like a really simple little track just so I can rig up in 3D Studio to kind of show you the workflow. I suppose the important thing really is the mesh skinning with tapping could be me typing, I suppose. I suppose the important thing to show is the mesh skinning with these. That's the hard bit, is setting up the skin modifier to do the movement of the track with the suspension. I will run through that. Anyway, I'll set something up sort of fresh, nice and simple. There won't be anything particularly elaborate. I was hoping to do some prep work beforehand, but life got in the way, as it does. So here we are. That's the medium track in 3D Studio. You can kind of see how it looks. You've obviously probably seen it in game, I suppose. So what I'm going to do is toggle a few bits and pieces, set some stuff up, and okay, so let's set up a little profile for a new track. Do it outscale for the moment. Like I said, nice and simple. Okay, so that little spline there is going to be our profile for new track. Flick to a left-hand side of view. We'll do something a bit different this time. So maybe not there. Let's make something a bit smaller. Yeah, that'll do. Perfect. Okay, like I said, I'm not going to really talk through the entire process. I'm just going to sort of crack on. If you've got any questions, ask. I've got the chat window up, and I'll try and answer them if I can. I'll either type it out or answer as I'm sort of messing around. All I'm doing at the moment is just setting up some splines just so I can make the spline for the track. So these little circles here won't actually end up being anything in particular. It gives us a bit of a clear view, doesn't it? go for something a bit different. Maybe a little closer to some of the old RBI designs, actually. Cool. Yeah, that'll do alright, I think. 0.75 for that one. I'm literally making this up as I go along. Okay. Yeah. Oh, I don't know. Something like that. Doesn't really matter. It's going to be a bit of a bodge anyway. Thank you. Sorry, I'm trying to do several things while I'm mucking about with this at the same time. Okay, and 0. That will do. Okay, so it literally is nothing special, but it should do for what we're trying to do. So I don't know what these tools are like compared to Blender that a lot of you guys use. Hopefully there's similar stuff. All this is useful for some of the Max users. I guess it might well be. No. Help if I was using an arc, wouldn't it? Okay. Cool. Theory. Remove those, and yeah, I think we're left with a spline that will work. Great. So join some of these bits together. We're going to make one continuous spline here because this is going to be what we loft for our track surface. Yeah, that's all good. Grab some of these, make sure you weld them together. We make that first, I think. That would make sense. As you've just seen the comment by Electronic Fox, I'm surprised the tools aren't the same because don't Autodesk make Maya and Max? I thought. I've never used Maya, but I always assumed that they would be quite similar. This has always struck me as being the simplest way to make track surfaces, basically. Divide these by couple. This is going to be the bendy part of the track, so realistically we need to make sure we've got enough detail in the bottom, because that's going to actually bend in a bit. You'll see. I'll try and sort of mess it up a little bit. The top doesn't really need too much detail. I might even get away with deleting some of these. No, not that. Vertexes. No, not so much. That's fine, it doesn't matter. Okay. That's cool. I think that'll do us. Right, okay. Switch back to my top view. I've got my little profile spline there. That's cool. Excellent. Right. We'll grab that and compound. And we want off and shape. I want to pick that, and it's going to look horrendous, which is fine. Shape. Find up there. Easier in perspective view here. Ah, great. Okay, now that looks a little better. Down a bit. And you can kind of see where we're headed now. Yeah, it doesn't look too bad for a little demo, does it? That'll do. We're just going to make a little sort of small thin track here. Okay. Angle's a little bit off. There we go, that's better. Yeah, much better. Okay. So standards. I'm just going to do wheels as cylinders here, nothing fancy at all. Something like that, that'll do. Help if I started naming some of these. Okay. 25, I think? Yeah, that'll do. That'll do. I'm not going to be super accurate, just for demo purposes. Two. Four. Okay, so we've got ourselves a very rudimentary track model. Turn it into perspective, it kind of shows up a little clearer. Yeah. Okay, so at the moment this doesn't do anything, you've just got a bunch of mesh basically. One thing to, or a few things to notice on here, I've used a, well, what Max calls a loft for this. Actually, I'm just going to adjust that. Actually, no, I'm not going to bother. Scheme parameters, that's fine. Let me turn on. There they go. Okay. This is the important bit. Apply mapping. Unless you do that and get Max to automatically generate it for you, it's a frigging nightmare mapping that. Having done that, I'll show you what it looks like. We grab and unwrap here. Grab a section through there. It's actually in the wrong orientation by default. I use a left to right wrap for the tracks, so you grab everything. There you go. And rotate it around. Perfect. Have a little section through the middle. There you go. That's getting some interesting visual artifacts. Maybe it's to do with the stream, I don't know. But it just kind of illustrates how the UV mapping works. You'll see in a minute, it will just sort of wrap around. It's quite easy, really. Ooh, funky effects. I think the stream might be messing up Max's rendering by the looks of it. That's very strange. I've never seen it do that before. How very odd. There are quite a few bugs in the UVW mapping thing, so I'm just going to create a thing here just to save it. I'll reload and restart Max, because it shouldn't look like that in the editor at all. Right, bear with me a second. Okay, that's better. Had some interesting issues with the UVW mapping dialog and the open broadcast software I use. I don't really know why. Not a lot I can do about it anyway. Right, okay, so we've got that, we've got it mapped. Hopefully it's working better downscaled. It should still be 1280 or so, so it should be relatively watchable still. Fingers crossed anyway, let me know how that goes. There should be plenty of upload bandwidth this end, so it's, yeah, it could well be the other end somewhere. Okay, so that doesn't really do a lot at the moment, it's just a fairly poor model really. So what we need to do here, the clever bit really, I'm not going to go through too much in terms of creating any structure for this. I'm just going to leave it open so we can see everything sort of moving about. What we want to do here is add some dummies. So top, actually, let's get rid of the medium track because we don't really need that anymore. Just hide. Okay, cool. Right. Yeah, we need some dummies basically, and we want to place these for where the wheels are basically. Actually, so I'll grab this, and set it to vertex point. Perfect. So wait a minute. By default, the orientation isn't right for the skinned mesh, so I'm just going to sort that out quickly. Cool. Okay. That is important. I'll show you in a minute for when we create the skin modifier. So, for anyone that doesn't know, these are just helper objects. They have no mesh at all. Just here. The size is important though. Polygons on the track. Yeah, it does have a fair few. You need a certain amount, which will become obvious in a minute. What I can sort of play around a little bit and show you what happens when you try sort of creating a track that doesn't have enough polygons and it looks really ugly. To be honest with you, I've never really found that polygons are a particular problem in KSP. It tends to be the physics engine that sort of slows stuff down rather than anything else. I think my models tend to be somewhere between 5 and 10,000 polys. To this date, I don't think anybody's noticed or complained, so I've never seen it as a particular problem. Somebody else might try and shout me down and prove me wrong, but really, it works. Trying to do it with any less would be interesting, I think, actually. Sorry, it can stay that size, that'd be fine. Okay, so should have thought about numbering these really, shouldn't I? But I didn't, so such is life. We'll keep them called dummy because it'll be easy. Yeah, I should have started at the front. Never mind. I'll just go through and rename them. These are important because I do actually use these in the config. The names of the wheels are important-ish too, because they also get named in the config as parts that get turned. These parts are here because they don't get turned, and I'll show you why in a minute. So 7. This can be 8, and that should be 9. Perfect. Okay. What, trying to do it low poly? Yeah, I'll show you what happens in a minute. It's quite funny. Let's do edged faces. Yeah, actually there is some stuff we can do about turning that down, and I probably should do. Let's get rid of that unwrap UVW because it's going to be useless in a minute. Skin parameters. Turn down the shape steps because we don't need those. What we do need is the path steps to a certain extent, but probably not as many as that. Probably that many will do us. There we go. I've just seen Electronic Voice's message actually. Yeah, that should do nicely actually. We've still got a poly count of 10,000 or so, but that's still counting the hidden medium track, so kind of ignore that for a minute. I'll delete it out so we can actually see. Easier instance, we don't need that many height steps in those. Not for what we're doing here. There you go. That's probably about as low poly as you'll ever make it. And have it still looking good. Yeah. We need these ones at the bottom, the top, not so much at all. And the width ones, no, you don't need them at all. It's a little bit more evident now I've turned on the edge faces. Cool. Okay, so I do need to do the UVW mapping again, even though it might decide to screw things up. So I'm just going to do that again. where's my dialogue gone? There we go. Cool. That should do it. That's all we need there. Great. One thing with the skin modifier I'm about to use is that anything above it in the stack doesn't actually get exported. So if you skin and then add the UVW modifier on top, it just gets ignored when you export it to DAE or FBX. It's caught me out a few times as to why my UVW mapping hasn't been updated. You can of course move it down in the stack, but moving stuff around in the stack can be a bit tricky. Okay, important bit now, the skin modifiers. This took me ages to learn, and electronic Fox will probably understand my pain here. So basically this is where, if you were character modelling, this is where you would attach bones, albeit I'm just using these dummy objects rather than a skeleton like you'd use in character animation. This is where you attach bones or the helper objects to the actual mesh and define how they move it about. It's an interesting beast to set up. So at the moment it doesn't do anything. What we want to do is we want to tie these helper objects in so they actually move this bit of mesh that we've created around. So turn that off, go back here, and we'll add in, move this into the correct screen. So we want to add all these dummies here. There, so now this is where it gets interesting. So if I go back here and start moving this, haha, brilliant. That's exactly what we wanted. Now it looks very easy because I've done this before. You'll notice I rotated these dummies 90 degrees. That is because if we look back here, the way it sets the envelopes up, if they've been in the default orientation, this envelope would be running forwards and backwards rather than left and right in this kind of semi-handy sort of wheel shape. Now you'll see I have kind of made a bit of a boo-boo here because they're all offset a little bit. It doesn't actually matter that much for what we're doing, but I will rectify that. So I'm just gonna, because if I move these now, untick edit envelopes, can't move these without deforming the track, which is kind of the point. But actually I want these in the middle of the track, don't I, rather than sat off to the side, just because it makes things a lot easier. So I'm just going to get rid of that skin modifier, grab all of my dummy objects, open the transform help, move them one. That'll do. Right. So they're kind of roughly in the middle now, not far off. I'm not going to mess about too much. Right, back here, add a skin modifier in again. Add my dummies again. Cool. Now we can go and click through here, and you can see that all of these are set up. Now, these envelopes get set up, or their size gets set up depending on the size of the dummies. I've found that making, for track wheels anyway, making the dummies about the size where they sort of touch each other seems to work fairly well for how it sets the envelopes up, which is why I've been relatively deliberate about that. It's one of those things, it took me ages the first time I did it, probably, I don't know, many evenings messing about trying to get the workflow sorted out so it's actually easy. I think the first time I did it, I ended up with all of these set up something, because like I said, in the default orientation they sort of set up something like that, and I ended up manually messing about trying to turn them around until I realised actually the envelopes are set up with the orientation of the dummy objects, and if you just get that right to start with, again, like with the size, everything just kind of slots into place. So if I go to one of these now, so if I grab this one here and I want to move that downwards and this one upwards. That doesn't look too bad for a motion, does it? It'll do. You can tweak it with the size of those envelopes. It defines how much, and you can see from the colours actually. If I go back here, red means that area will move entirely with that particular dummy, and as it fades out to blue, it has less of an effect. You can see the area that this has an effect on intersects with the area that this one has an effect on. In theory, anything within that inner little envelope there is completely affected, and it sort of fades out to the edge there. You can see it's blue just right on the edge, and you can actually affect whether it fades out linearly or this is kind of a slow fall off, and you can change that depending on exactly what you want. For the purposes of making tracks, actually the slow fall off works quite well. We do have a few things to deal with because ideally we only want these to affect the bottom of the track, and at the moment it's not too bad up there, probably because it's being affected by that top. There you go. You see it's moving the top of the track as well, which we don't want at all. This is where it gets a little bit complicated. So we've got that one. That's not too bad. We do want to mess about with it a little bit. Yeah, I don't even want to mess about with skinning full character models, to be honest with you. I've seen people do it, mucked about it a little bit myself. No, the tracks are difficult enough. The tools are interesting at the best of times. Right, what do we want here? Skin modifier. I want the weight table, really, what I need to mess about with. Having said that, I'm going to actually parent these to there. The way I have it all set up is, and you kind of have to really, is the wheels are all child objects of the dummy helpers. Because if you had the dummy helpers spun like the wheel would, you end up with this, which isn't cool, much as it looks funny. Yeah, so just make the wheels child objects of the helpers. It's kind of helpful to do it at this stage just because you can then sort of see how everything moves. There we go. So now you can see that looks a little ugly up there. It's not what we really want. So that's what I'm going to fix at the minute, mucking about with the weight table a little bit. And view. Oh. You might have to bear with me here. This thing's kind of an interesting beast to use. I'm selecting vertexes only. Where's it gone? That's better. That should get me where I want. Okay, With the weight tab, where you can do some interesting things with adjusting how each of the envelopes affect the mesh as they move. So we can just tell, for example, if I select those vertexes, nope, that's not what I wanted at all. Edit, selectable. Okay. Dummy 8 and 9, I don't want to move those ones that I've selected there, so go across to here. There we go. So I just zeroed the effect that they had, that those two. Oh, you can see actually I've got those in the wrong orientation. Look. Not that it matters for what we're doing. Okay. If I grab hold of this, you should find. Yeah, it looks a little ugly, doesn't it? Undo my weight change. Remove those two. Spin them around because this will probably. Yeah, right, I kind of have to do that. Yeah, just in one axis, please. Into. Much easier. I'm not going to perfect how the track skinning looks. I'm just going to sort of set it up and throw it in game, and you can see how it's then configured. Roughly. Yeah, cool. Okay, back here. Add 8 and 9. That's not too far off. Stuff moves. So that's kind of how the skinning works. A lot more finesse if you want a more complicated track or it to look a little nicer. I think there's probably dual dummies on some of my other models here and there, so you get a sort of fade in between a sort of fast fade out and a linear fade out, and different bits affect different parts. It can get quite involved, but you get the idea anyway. If you want a full tutorial on that, some good ones like Electronic Fox said, full character animation gives you quite a good rundown of how to do it with sort of bones rigs. So making tracks is fairly simple in comparison. That's fundamentally our model there. We've got our UVW mapping, we've got our skinning, got some wheels. What wouldn't be a bad idea is some kind of box, just to give it some semblance of it's going to attach somewhere to something. There we go. Okay, that should do it. Cool, so that's our very, very rudimentary track. It's nothing special, like I say, I've just thrown it together. I was hoping to do a little bit of prep work beforehand and get something pretty made up, but I've literally done that completely ad hoc. It's not Blue Peter, I don't have one, I had one that I made earlier. So at this point, what I'm going to do is select everything that isn't a spline. Export selected, and go and find my Unity stuff. KSP4GT assets, new folder. Let's call it Twitch Track. If I actually made a new folder. I tend to use DAE. I don't think there's much difference between DAE and FBX really. You can more or less use default stuff from here. I don't actually have any animations in here. The important thing is that I think whether you have animation or not, it probably exports skins, or it always seems to. The rest of it, yeah. And that's exported. So fire up Unity. Okay, there we go. Actually, that's the long track in Unity in all of its rigged up glory, as it were. You can see I've got some wheel colliders and stuff rigged up there. We'll get rid of that. Using delete the camera. Right, let's go and find our Twitch track and just pop it in the scene there. Oh, that's interesting. I moved it down, didn't I? Never mind, that doesn't matter. You find that the dummies lose their sort of mesh representation. They just get turned into empty game objects in Unity, which is fine. It's part of the export process. DAE doesn't actually support having the sort of the dummy mesh that they do in Max. With, yeah, it doesn't matter. You can see that the wheels are children of those, etc., etc. I haven't called the wheels anything particularly sensible. A cool thing to note here actually is you can see these are all blues because these are part of the it's telling me they're still part of the prefab. If I decided to remove an object, and there, box 1 for example, you get a message about losing the prefab and they go non-blue. At which point if you add anything more into here or change some of the stuff, it doesn't necessarily update automatically. So we'll undo that and get our nice prefab back. So if I go back into this, the wheel's something a bit more sensible. So wheel 001 to match the dummy it's childed to. Two, 3, 4. Okay. Back to Unity, and there you go. All updated, except I got wheel 9 and 8 the wrong way around. Oh well, never mind. We'll want to do a few things like add collider, for example. You would have seen this in, no doubt, many other tutorials. Just a simple box collider there, just so we have something to click on for the VAB. You'll probably want something more, but whatever. So we're going to do an interesting trick here. All the wheel colliders pretty much in the same place as the actual wheel meshes are. In fact, that's probably perfect. So I'm just going to highlight all of those and just do a Control D. So actually, there we go. And we don't want the mesh, so remove the mesh render and mesh filter, because we just want some empty game objects to add physics, wheel collider. Oh, isn't that pretty? There we go. All in the right place in orientation, pretty much. Easy. There's a couple of them which need 1 and 7, I think. Need the radius upping a little bit just to match the other ones. There you go, that's roughly right. And suspension distance is 0.2. That's good, not 0.4. Yeah, that'll do. Have something sensible for grip values. That'll do nicely. 2 will do fine. Anything else? No, I think that'll do. Actually, they ain't dragging anywhere. Now remember, if you see my wheel tutorials, these do not want to be children of the dummy objects, because having the wheel colliders actually moved up and down by the script that's mocking the visual suspension movement is not a great idea. So I tend to just have them as a sort of a child of the base object. I'm just creating an object here just to put the part tool script on. And nice and neat, like round figures. Cool. Okay. I tend to just call this root. Just have those children like that. Okay, that should be fine. Yeah, Zodius is asking about why I had the wheel colliders as children of the rollers. All I did there was just use the the rollers as game objects basically. So I duplicated them because it duplicates the position of them, and now I've moved the wheel colliders out of the hierarchy, so they're not, they absolutely do not want to be there or there at all ever, because the script is set up to move the suspension as the wheel collider sort of mocks a wheel, and if you move the wheel collider with that, all hell breaks loose and you end up with your suspension that squashes or stuff that moves all over the place. So you absolutely don't want that. They want to be, the wheel colliders want to be in a solid position that doesn't get moved by the script, and it's as simple as that really. In actual fact, we don't need those two wheel colliders at all because they're going to do nothing. So yeah, there we go. Cool. Okay, so add KSP part tools, Twitch track. Where do I put it these days? Parts. Okay. Cool. See if it writes successfully there. Ignore those two because it gives you those anyway. Yeah, successful right. Okay, so cool. We need some textures at least for the track just to give us an idea of what goes on there. So if I use the long track will do. Yeah, ha. The placement isn't quite right, but we can sort that out in a minute. What happens basically is all the texture animation for the track does is increment this value. So not that one. We can fix this here actually. 0.5. Except it's significantly less wide than it might be. Set. Yeah, basically the script does this. That's all it does. It just rolls the text around using the offset. So the default one is fine, and we can probably okay. There we go. 2. Someone might do it. There we go. That's got the placement about. Or I can actually muck about with the UV mapping in Max to mess about with that. But sometimes it's easy, you just roll it around there. So okay, so if we grab our dummy game object, and you can see it looks a little bit like how my tracks do in KSP really. At which point we can just write that out with the texture. Got a little bump map on it as well, it's nothing special. You probably recognise the texture from some of my other models. I won't bother with the other stuff. Other people have covered, you know, UV unwrapping and stuff. What I will do, because I'm aware we've dragged on for just over an hour now, let's have bear with me a minute, I'm just finding no. Just finding a config for us to copy because it's much easier than writing it out fresh. We'll use the medium track as a basis. So yeah, that's cool. Parts. Okay, so this is kind of what our configs look like. So let's do the name. I'm using model nodes because I've got more than one model inside this directory. I'm just moving to this so we can do some texture sharing. Otherwise you can just have one model on one config per directory and just use the mesh equals thing. Giving it a unique name. Okay. Something so we can see it in the editor. Cool. I haven't got the arrow for the orientation marker, so we can get rid of that. The really important bit here, the rest is just general part stuff. It doesn't matter. We might have to look at the attached nodes, but they shouldn't be hopefully too far out. See. So KF module wheel is the key one, I suppose. I'm just going to run through a few of the config things because I know Zodius was interested in that. Oh, the track. Yeah, maybe I'd mislabeled that one. What did I call that there? Which track? I must have called it track somewhere. Chatting where I've called it the track. Yes, the track. But I'm just leave it like that because it's kind of Kerbal actually. Yeah, so KF module wheel. Tweak scale corrector is obviously something to do with tweak scale. Leave that. It's just defaulted to 1 there in the config. I believe it is in code as well. It's just so it's a placeholder or something. Raycast error is if you get a little bit of wheel float or the wheels are sinking into the ground, you can adjust where the mesh is in relation to where the collider thinks it is. Spring rate and damper rate are just defaults for what happens in the right click menu. Smooth speed is something to do with steering, so we can leave that alone. Torque curve is the same as the wheels really. That's how much torque they produce for a given speed. So it's speed and how much torque. We can tune that later. Torque steering is the low speed steering mode, so they can actually run differentially. Again, speed and how much torque. So when you're pressing the A and D keys, that's what turns it. Steering curve is for wheels, that's how much they'd actually turn. Brake steering curve. Now, I actually found that the differential motor torque doesn't work very well at high speeds. So what happens with the tracks is that the turning at higher speeds is actually done by braking the inside track rather than applying motor torque, sort of negative motor torque to the inside one and positive motor torque to the outside one. It got a little bit weird. Rolling resistance and load coefficient are a new thing which I've added in. I've been working with Kite on some bits and pieces. So basically this defines how much rolling resistance there is for any given speed and how much they're loaded. So basically tracks, their rolling resistance doesn't change much when you load them, but their rolling resistance goes up quite a lot when you're going fast. It's the opposite for wheels. Braking torque should be fairly self-explanatory. Max RPM is mostly to do with the sound effects. The next module we come to, KF Track surface. This is what actually rolls the texture around the track surface as it's rolling along. Track length actually isn't anything to do with adjustable track length. That's just it's like a correction factor for if the speed is wrong. We use that to tune it. Up until this point, KF module wheel handles basically control input and output. It doesn't do any of the physical mesh stuff. That's what KF wheel is for. So in here, this is where we actually get to name our bits of mesh and stuff. So wheel name is the mesh of the wheel that gets rotated around. Collider name is obviously the name of the wheel collider it's bound to. Sustrav name, this is kind of a hangover from the stock modules really, I suppose. This is going to be the dummy object that we use for suspension. So one of these that the wheel is a child of. Steering name we can ignore for that, but that would be the object that gets steered. I don't think it actually needs to be set, but I tend to find it's good practice just to make sure that everything does have something real to find, otherwise you can end up with null refs. Is idler, I can't remember what that does, probably nothing these days. Has steering, that's to do with whether the whether that particular wheel has steering or not, and whether it gets affected by control input. Obviously with tracks, you don't want the colliders turning because it's done with obviously differential torque and braking, so we'll leave that alone. Rotation correction is just to make sure that we can get the speed of the wheel turning correctly. It's just a correction factor. Smooth speed is to do with how quickly it reacts to steering control inputs, but again that's for wheels. Wheel rotation X, Y and Z is for which we set which axis we want the wheel to rotate around. I have a feeling here we probably want it around, oh no, Z looks correct actually, yeah, so we probably do want it around the Z. The sustro axis is which axis the dummy object gets moved along, in which case here the Y is correct. So actually we can use this module as our basis for all the rest of them. So I'm just going to get each wheel, you essentially have a KF wheel module 4 basically. So I'm going to get rid of those other ones there. And that one too. So we'll set this up. So wheel name is just wheel 00. Importantly, I need to set these to a unique name. By my convention, WC something something. Laborious, and I'm sorry. Okay. If we had the game objects named the same as the wheels, all hell's going to break loose. That's why I need to change that. Okay. And we re-export that. Right, okay. 00. Suspension traverse object is called dummy. 00. I'm just setting this up generically so I can copy and paste it for the other 7 things. And that can be called dummy 00, even that's going to do nothing. The rest of that can remain as it is, so basically paste it 7 times. I'm going to change this shortly so it's actually list driven rather than having to have a separate part module. But for the moment, this is how it works. So 1, 1, 1. Perfect. And actually, that should probably do it. Let's see if it works. Call it something other than medium track, really. Let's call it track. Okay, cool. And hello, Kerbal Space Program. I think this is still my 0.9 dev environment, so the loading's a bit slow. Depends which one I clicked on. Come on! I'm currently in the process of setting up all the Kerbal Foundries stuff to do a bit of texture sharing, because there's obviously a load of track textures which are shared between different models, so for the next release that should consume a lot less memory, along with potentially DDSing if I can get the quality up. This is taking even longer than usual today. Okay. And here we go. Let's find out if it actually worked. And the moment of truth. Second page. Which track? Yes, there we go. The attach node's a little bit off, but actually that suits us quite well. Floaty tracks. Why not? Quick look through the log. Well, okay, no null ref so far from the modules. The real acid test is will it launch? Ignore those warnings from Unity. All that's happened there is that the I do know a way of fixing that now. I need to get around to it, but all it is basically we've only got 3 tracks. That's annoying. All that's happening there is that the wheel colliders got activated before the oh, you can see it's kind of working despite the fact it's only got 3 tracks. You might even see if I highlight this that the wheels are spinning as well. And I've obviously got the wheel colliders the wrong way around because the control's going the wrong way. But yeah, you get the idea. It works, and you can see that track texture gets rolled around. If I back gravity, yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Ooh, something's all wrong with one of the scales there. That's absolutely brilliant. I have a feeling. Let me look back here. Yeah, okay. The scale's all set to 0.1 for the wheel colliders. Yeah, that looks a lot more sensible. and they shouldn't be a meter in diameter. Oh, that's brilliant. One of those things where you're modding, where you'll find one of those bizarre situations. Did I delete number 7 as well? Ah, that won't help. That's better. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you can see why the suspension was way out of whack. You have to be a bit careful with the scale on the wheel colliders. So we literally do want not even 0.1, 0.05 will probably do it. Right, okay. Cool. Back to KSP. Right, we'll just reload it quickly. We'll get that model updated. Yeah, as I was saying about that funny warning with the wheel collider, is I think that's basically the collider getting activated before KSP has started the physics going. So at that point, the wheel collider doesn't think it's attached to anything with a rigid body on it, which is why you get the wheel collider needs to be attached to rigid body message. I just need to add a little delay routine into the startup. It's one of the things I think the stock module suffers from, so it doesn't actually hurt anything because the rigid body gets added afterwards. It just appears in the log, and I've seen people sort of panic about it because, you know, it comes up in orange and stuff at the end of the day. It is a warning. Not one we have to pay attention to, but there you go. Brilliant. Sometimes reloading when the things have already been activated is not the best idea, so you get the idea of what happens when your suspension gets completely out of whack though. So let's go. Should be right. Read the correct scale. Yeah, that should be fine. Yeah, break the part correctly. We'll recreate the vessel from scratch. You get an idea of how frustrating modding can be sometimes. The editor icons are all screwed up because reload stops the Evil Reaper's part icon fixer from working properly. There we go. Actually got 4 tracks this time as well, which will kind of help. You notice I didn't fix the attachment positions, but actually I don't really care. Hoping this works. It'd be embarrassing if not. That looks a bit better, doesn't it? you can see where I didn't really spend much time setting up my skin modifier, where the middle dummies are affecting the track, but you kind of get the idea for how it's supposed to behave. And if I start, we have some gravity, doesn't it? If I start rolling along, you can see the wheels are merrily rotating, the track surface is rolling around. That's it, a track from start to finish in what, an hour and a half. I know it's not a very good model, but it takes a lot longer than that to make good ones. I'm probably going to leave it there, really. Any questions, I guess probably post them in thread is the best thing, and then the questions and answers are there. If there's anything else wants covering, I can do another little session later on. You can see actually you've got here where the there's two options. You can either make the wheel colliders a little bit bigger, and in fact on a lot of the models I tend to, you can see they're actually a little bit small there, which kind of goes some way to showing it. Actually, let's save the scene. Where's Twitch Track? That's what I can type. Yeah, let's load up the long track. Where are you? There we go. Actually, they're set to about the right size. You can use the config field of raycast error to move things a little bit up and down if you find that your mesh is sort of sinking into the ground a little bit. That is what it's for. There seems to be a little bit of a discrepancy between the raycast and where it actually sits, which is why it's in there. It's just for fine tuning, really. Yeah, I think that's probably it. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know I've witted on for over an hour and a half now. There's quite a lot to get through, but anyway, hopefully it was useful. Cheers, guys.